First of all, the conflict that we have in the Middle East is multiple. It used to be said that the core of the conflict in the singular in the Middle East is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Well, that went by the window. When you see Iraq collapsing, Syria collapsing, Yemen collapsing, Libya collapsing, and everything else in turmoil, nothing to do with us. The core of the conflicts in the Middle East is the battle between modernity and early primitive medievalism. That's the core of the conflicts.
The world has traveled for thousands of years through so many different challenges. We have finally made it to the 21st century. God is gifting us the best of times with the most prosperity, so that we should take all the experience from the beginning of time to the 21st century. Yet, the Arabs and the Muslims, they are trying to pull us back to the 7th century. That is what the war is all about. It's about modern civilization versus medieval barbarism. They're stuck in the 7th century. The world needs to mature and move forward. We cannot go backward.
George Priest asked me to explain why we don't have peace. You have until tomorrow? Here's my short answer. I have two rules when I'm in a press conference. When I have journalists, I put a board on and they ask me the questions. I write all the questions. I write all the questions. And then I go through each one, and here's my answer to that, here's my answer to that, here's my answer to that. And this one, I'm fudging. I don't want to fudge. I actually tell them that I fudge. I don't want to fudge. I want to tell you what the answer is. The reason, first of all, the conflict that we have in the Middle East is multiple. It used to be said that the core of the conflict in the singular in the Middle East is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Well, that went by the window. When you see Iraq collapsing, Syria collapsing, Yemen collapsing, Libya collapsing, and everything else in turmoil, nothing to do with us. The core of the conflicts in the Middle East is the battle between modernity and early primitive medievalism. That's the core of the conflicts. The core of the specific conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is the persistent Palestinian refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any boundary. This is why this conflict persisted for 50 years before there was a state, before there were territories, before there were settlements. If that were the core of the conflict, the settlements, why did it take place when my grandfather landed in Jaffa in 1920? Jews were murdered then for what? There was no West Bank. There were no settlements. Now that continued in 1921, 1929, 1936, 1939, 1948. What was that all about? 1967. For nearly half a century, we were being attacked because there was a persistent refusal to accept us in any boundary. Well, we got into these territories as a result of the conflict. And what Arab propaganda has done by endless repetition is to turn the result of the conflict into its cause. Now, how do you know that that's the case? Because we left Gaza completely, every last centimeter. And they're still firing rockets at us from Gaza. And when you ask them, why are you doing this? Is it to liberate the West Bank? And they say, yeah, sure, that too, but no, it's to liberate Palestine. You know, Akko, Haifa, Jaffa. They always get back to Jaffa. So now I turn to the other guys, to the Palestinian Authority, not to Hamas. At least they don't practice violence, which is important. And I say, well, what about you? Are you willing to recognize the Jewish state? Are you willing to recognize the fact you'll have a nation state for the Palestinian people? How about a nation state for the Jewish people? I mean, after all, we've only been there almost 4,000 years. and we recognize there are two peoples there, we're willing to make the deal. Are you willing to make the deal? Are you willing to recognize the Jewish state? Because there's no point in making another Palestinian state, another Arab state that will continue the battle from improved lines against the Jewish state. Are you willing to end the conflict? Give up the claim of the so-called right of return. Make peace. And you know what happens when you ask them that? They move. And they say, oh, we're willing to recognize Israel. I didn't ask Israel. I said, are you willing to terminate all claims to the Jewish state? You won't get Jaffa. You won't flood us with refugees. Are you willing to do that? And the answer is they're not. We will have peace when the Palestinians will accord us what they ask us to accord them. We're willing to let them have a state of their own. They have to reconcile themselves to the fact that we have a state of our own, and it's here to stay. That is the core of the problem. In the Middle East, modernity against medievalism, Israel and the Palestinians, the persistent refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any boundary. I hope that changes, but I have my mind on making sure that until it changes, that yes, we work up the economies to create at least an economic vested hope in the future. If the Palestinians follow the prescriptions I've given here for market development, they'll be better off economically and we'll move 2 steps closer to peace too. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Prime Minister, Mr. Bibi Netanyahu, congratulations. You were able to summarize the whole situation in such concise words. Although at the beginning you said you need a whole day to really explain why there's no peace. But you broke it down in a way that we can understand, that we can appreciate. But the world doesn't appreciate. And the point is, it's not about land. It's definitely not about Israel. And one of the proof is, on October 7, when the attack occurred, one of the most painful but one of the most telling events were when a young terrorist, a Hamas terrorist, calls up his mother, and this is all recorded. And he says, Mama, look, I killed 10 Jewish people with my own hands. I still have the blood on my hands. I'm so excited. And the mother just praises him, praises him, praises him. It wasn't about killing Israelis. It wasn't about Israel. It was about the Jewish people. It was about Judaism, who adopts to every century that it's in. That no matter what millennial we are in, God has taught us that our mandate in life is to be a light unto the nations, is to adapt to the times. The Torah that was given at Mount Sinai 3,337 years ago is an eternal Torah, adaptable to every century, for every millennia. It is so applicable to the 21st century. I have oftenly joked about the idea that when God created the world in 6 days, rested on the 7th day, and the laws were taught that on the 7th day, it has to be different than the 6 days. The 7th day is the holy day, which we call Sabbath. And I had a thought that, when God created that Sabbath, I think it was for the 21st century. I think God had the foresight to know how our generation right now, we need a break once a week. We need to get unplugged from our phones, from our computers, from our electronics, from all the buzzes, bings, and whistles that we hear all day long. We need a break. We need 24 hours just to break from it all. Get unplugged. Mr. Charlie Kirk, may he rest in peace. One of his last books, maybe it was his last book, was Stop for God. It was about Sabbath. And he spoke about it even though he wasn't Jewish. He's a devout Christian, but he adopted the Jewish Sabbath. From Friday night to Sunday night, from Friday night to Saturday night, he would not answer the phone. He got unplugged. And he wrote about it. What his inspiration was from Dennis Prager. And he admired and understood the necessity for that. And this is how God intended this world to be, that we move forward. We continue moving forward. When the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Houthis, Hamas, Iran, they want to remain in the barbaric 7th century mentality. The Jewish people in the West have moved way forward. We're in the 21st century. And that's what they cannot stand. That's why they hate us. And we look back and realize of all the sacrifices that our ancestors went through so that we can be here today, so that we can live in the land of the free. Think about the United States of America is approaching its 250th anniversary of existence. Think about all the sacrifices that our forefathers have done to create the America that we are enjoying today. Very different from the rest of the world. Introducing capitalism, introducing individual freedoms and ability to make your own choices. This is a novelty, but that was the gift God gave to the world. God gave us at the time because the world needed it more than ever. So we need to continuously remember what the war is truly all about. And if the Palestinians' war was all about statehood, 2005, August 15, 20 years ago, every single Jew, every single Israeli was expelled from Gaza. Not one Jew was allowed to step foot into Gaza. Talking about apartheid. Not one Jew was allowed to go into Gaza. And Israel gave this land away. First time of all of its history that it gave away its own land. And at the time, it was land for peace. Everyone was convinced that if we give them their own land, they're going to be appeased and satisfied and the war is over. So we gave them the whole Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip has the potential to be the most beautiful coastal Riviera. With the billions of dollars that were poured in internationally, they had the ability to rehabilitate, to rebuild a whole Gaza Strip to be another like what Beirut used to be. Or just go down the United Emirates, you go down these coastal, beautiful Arab countries. They had all the potential to do it. Israel was not there. We weren't occupying. Well, what's this occupation? We're not there. We gave you the Gaza to create your own statehood, if that's what you really wanted. Obviously, that wasn't what they wanted. They really didn't care about statehood. They just want Israel gone. They want the Jewish people gone. This is a religious war. It's not a real estate war. And that type of war can only be won through strength. So now perhaps you'll understand a little better of what the war that Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu has been fighting and why the fight still goes on until we can eradicate this radical behavior and death cult from amongst us. Kindly subscribe to our channel so a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness. God bless you. God loves you.